I will first present what is AlternaFuture. I will not have this much text on each of my slides, but I will actually read this one, so sorry for that, but it's a good description. AlternaFuture shall study extreme upgrading of existing hydropower system, while still improving the environmental conditions. We need such a desk study to get an overview of the problems and the need for research to enable such reconstruction in the future. So the scope is not to actually develop, design and build extreme upgrading, but we will do it as a challenge ourselves to see what are the problems that we need to solve in order to maybe do it in the future. There are 4 scopes in AlternaFuture. We will investigate this extreme upgrading, and more concise, we will study how to triple the installed capacity in an existing hydropower system. That is quite a challenge. We will hopefully strengthen the multidisciplinary cooperation in HydroCen. So all of the 4 work package leaders in HydroCen are kind of describing what is this project, what have been our tasks, and then we have to work together to solve it, hopefully strengthening our healthy relationship. Then we will stress test the innovations from HydroCen. So we have a list now of all the innovations you and others have made, and then we test them in a case study in the system that we are studying. And then finally, we want to trigger new research projects. So one of the deliveries is a big list of new projects that we want to do. So we have a long list, and yesterday I sent it on a hearing to the project leaders in HydroCen, asking for, is this list everything? Do you have more? And do you have comments to the projects we have proposed? Here is a very nice dam from our case study, Mandalsvassdraget. There used to be a concert and festival here every year called Under the Dam. That is no more because now this dam is decommissioned and water is on top of this one because they built a new larger dam downstream. So that is a bit sad, but because it was a very nice dam. Yes, so we have selected a case study. This is Mandalsvassdraget. It's a long catchment, and I think we can define it as the most southern river, big river at least, in Norway. Outlets in Mandal here. As you see, it's 140 kilometers long. It has about 1,200 meters of head from top to bottom. There are 6 hydropower plants, which I will show afterwards. Total installed capacity, almost 400 megawatts. And annual production, 1.7 terawatt hours. So this is our case study, and we want to see how can we triple the installed capacity in this system. And we have chosen this one because it gives us a lot of challenges. It's not an easy system if you want to upgrade one. Sorry for this map. This is NV Atlas with all the buttons almost pressed. And you can see here we have up here is the first power plant, the second one. Here is the third, fourth, fifth, and sixth. So it's 2 major rivers coming down and then gathering together and going together to the sea. And this blue box here is river protection. This green box is landscape protection. And in all the best places where we see, okay, here we could build a big new reservoir, there is a lot of people living there, of course. So we have chosen in the project that we shall respect all of these restrictions which are there. We are going to make a realistic study. If we shall upgrade it, we cannot take this protected river, which of course was very tempting. It's a very good and nice river, and we cannot build anything inside landscape protection. And we have to make sure the people are still happy and not swimming around after we have done our project. So this generates a lot of problems for us, which gives us, shows us what we have to research to make this possible. And of course, there is a very important salmon population here. So Halvor, at least, he knows this very well. He is studying intake here, Laudal, because the salmon has to get past the power plant. So that is also a very important restriction for us. We have 3 activities in the project. Activity 1 is to map the current system. See how it operates, what are the uses, environmental and social use, recreational. And there is a lot of flooding problems, which we have also mapped. And we want to do this to establish what is the reference situation today. What is the system today? And then when we upgrade it, that is kind of the baseline which we compare against. Then we are developing some upgrading scenarios. We started with a workshop pretty early in the project where we gathered the HydroCen user partners and whoever wanted to join. And we asked them, where can we build new power plants and make this upgrade? So we got a long list. I think it was 50 proposals or something. It was very long. And we have narrowed it down, and we have made a screening and selected what we think are the best projects. So from the beginning, we said we want to make minimum 2 scenarios, but we have made now 3. So I will present them later. And as we said, we want to respect all the environmental restrictions we have. The last activity is to then quantify. We made all the scenarios, and then we want to simulate them with the production simulation tools at SINTEF and show how is this system actually operated. If we gave Agder Energi, who owns this system, triple installed capacity, how will they actually operate those power plants? And then see, can this actually be profitable? We think not, but then the question is, how must the power prices evolve before this is actually profitable? And then, of course, the environmental restrictions. Are we actually able to do this without kind of having a severe negative environmental impact? We want to have a positive impact. Yes, so that was the introduction. Then Torbjørn can present the first activity.
Yes, thank you. One of the topics we had to address is what is the status of the different parts of the system, and it's a complex and large system. This is just a map showing the different parts of the system in terms of the water bodies. There are several reservoirs and there are several river stretches that we need to try to describe what is the status, the current status in this system. There's an example here of one of the reservoirs, and here's an example of one of the river stretches with a very low flow. One of them there are different systems established today to classify the environmental status. Some of you might know this Water Framework Directive that has been implemented in Norway. They have a system for classifying the environmental status of water bodies. One of the challenges is that in this system, if there is a lot of fish, the status is very good. But as you might know, if there's a lot of fish, the fish might be very small. And from a human point of view, from an exploitation point of view, from a recreational point of view, that is not a very good state. And it's also one of the major challenges is also that this watercourse has been strongly influenced by acid rain. So it's in a relatively poor condition simply due to acidification. There are two main fish species present, the Arctic char, this beautiful reddish fish here, and the brown trout. The lower part of the system is limed. So basically the river system is totally dependent on this small little supply of water with the liming. That's what is keep this whole, at least the salmon-bearing part of the river alive. There are two major automatic liming stations that supply, according to the current pH level, lime to that improves the chemical conditions. We also had to describe the hydrological challenges. For the rivers, we chose to use this low flow bottlenecks and look at how the minimum winter flow on a weekly basis has been changed, and how the minimum summer and winter has been changed after regulation. We also did a mapping of the recreational interests. All rivers are important for people, and there are several recreational interests that we should consider. So we've been mapping activities at reservoirs, using net search and other ways of figuring out what we can find from the desktop study. And also here you have to make a choice. Do we look at undisturbed nature as the most important recreational areas, or do we choose to look at areas where there actually are a lot of people, lots of activity? And our conclusion was that we ended up looking at where there are lots of people. There are some cabins, there are some permanent residents, there are roads. So we try to compile that. Just an example of how we did the description of the values and the baseline today. This is from one of the reservoirs where we look at the abundance of fish. This is wild trout. And there's also some releases of hatchery fish. And we have a description of the water chemistry. ANC is not African National Congress, it's acid neutralization capacity. Aluminium is actually what kills the fish in a acidification situation. And pH, of course, you know what it is. So the conclusion here is that there is sufficient recruitment of fish. There is a medium stock size. And we also look at the size of the females, because that's a very good indication of the quality of the fish. So this is medium-large females. And there's also potential for fishing. So this is kind of, we go through for every reservoir and every river stretch to try to get an overview of what is the value here and what is the status. For the same, we also looked at the hydrology I mentioned, and we particularly look at, of course, the maximum and minimum regulated river levels, but also the actual operation of the reservoir within these limits. And we looked at recreational use. This is an example of a reservoir where it's extensive use for hiking during winter and summer. There are biking opportunities. This enters to this Setesdal Vest-Høyre Fylkeheiene landscape protection area. There are tourist cabins. There's a tourist center. There's many private cabins. So this would typically be a reservoir with a high value, a lot of recreational use. So we go through all of these reservoirs and all of the river stretches. And then the challenge was to present environmental cards. That is good projects that could improve environmental conditions. And the environmental conditions in this context also include recreational use, landscapes and stuff like that. So these were cards that we could play with other people, with the hydropower people, to see if there is some cards that can be used to improve environmental conditions within the different scenarios we are working on. So I think we have now 10 or maybe 11 environmental cards. Some are in reservoirs and some are in river stretches. Some new minimum flow stipulations has been included. Several habitat measures in reservoirs. One potential reservoir restriction, but with habitat measures as an alternative. Very important one, new salmon fishway to introduce salmon into a new area. And measures to improve recreational use. I'm not going to present all of it. One of the major environmental cards we introduced in all scenarios is actually building this fish ladder, fishway, and allow the salmon to ascend a stretch, which is today more or less dry. So we need some minimum flow stipulation as well. But this could significantly increase the salmon production in this river system. While looking at these different environmental cards, we saw a lot of new challenges that we need to address. As you will see, there is a pumping hydropower scenario, and we should actually start pumping from the salmon-bearing stretch. And it's okay to pump water, but it's not okay to pump juvenile salmonids. We don't need that on 600-700 meters above sea level. It's not a very good idea. So we need to ensure that fish do not enter this turbine, pumping turbine. There is a suggestion, as you will see, for a large flood hydropower station. It's called that, flood power plant. And of course, that ends up in the ocean, and you don't want salmonids to end up in the ocean before they're supposed to. Also, we came up with an idea. I think it's brand new, actually, to use celluviers. That's kind of a construction consisting of stones. I'll have an example of this. This is a celluvier structure from a river system. One of the main challenges in many of these hydropower reservoirs is that the access to the spawning tributaries are hindered. Either it's very steep or the water is allocated and spread into a fan. So the fish cannot actually enter into the spawning tributaries. So our idea is to use this kind of cell structure to ensure that the fish can actually enter at different levels in the reservoir. So a very interesting idea, and I don't think that has ever been done before. So maybe we have an innovation here. Yes, thank you.
now I think there. Nice. Okay. Then I will present activity 2, which is kind of the developing scenarios activity. We, as I said earlier, the idea was to develop minimum 2 scenarios, one with triple installed capacity and one with minimum 500 megawatts of pump storage. Ja, tack. So here, first, are all the Hydropower projects that we found that here we have filtered out a lot, the really bad ones, and which might have significant environmental effects that we could not allow. So here are a lot. We have some new reservoirs. That was a big challenge because we struggled a long time to find new reservoirs. So Erik Arvitas, he was scrolling up and down this river in NV Atlas trying to search for reservoirs. Didn't find. But then one day he said, I found a big one. And then it was right next to an existing reservoir here. And it's actually larger than the largest reservoir they have today. And there is only one cabin. So there is a ski track, so it has some consequences. But for a reservoir of this size, we were a bit eager that we could actually find one. So that was good. Then we have this flood power plant, which I will present later. And a lot of more conventional, just taking 2 old power plants and connecting them into one. And of course, a lot of pump storage plants. So here is the first scenario. Because, as Torbjørn mentioned, they made the environmental cards, and we had this hydropower cards. And then we had this simple method that we kind of played cards and saw if we have one hydropower card, how many environmental cards are necessary to, just as playing with your football cards or Pokemon cards from the old days. So these scenarios, they are what we think is a balanced scenario, where we have enough environmental cards to make this actually environmentally positive. So here we have the tripled installed capacity scenario. Here we combine the 2 upper power plants, and we make some more environmental flow and some measures in the reservoirs. For example, these cell weirs to allow spawning inside rivers. Then we have some environmental cards here also for the reservoirs. And this is a pretty simple scenario in terms of hydropower because we simply make new power plants in parallel with the old ones. It's the most easy way to triple the installed capacity. So this is the upper reach where there are 2 rivers connecting, and then this is the lower part where we have here also connection of 2 power plants, and here we have Laudal, and this is the new flood power plant to the sea. I really like that one, but I will show it later. Yeah. Then we have a maximum flexibility scenario, which is basically big pump storage power plants. So here we have these 2 rivers, and we have this one, looks strange. It's one pump storage plant with 4 upper reservoirs. The idea of this project is also to challenge what is the possibilities with existing technology and what we can see will become available in the future. So here it's this variable speed pump turbines that can pump to very different range of head. One of these reservoirs have several hundred meters of head, while one of them have, I think, only 80. So it's a very large range. Then we have here, this is the new big reservoir. It doesn't look so big, but this one is really shallow and narrow. But this one is actually the same size as this large one. And this one is really big. And then we have this pump storage system going down here. And we have one big one on top also. So basically now with this system we can run this water in a circle. So that is maximum flexibility in our study. So I have to mention that of course here we have not looked at the economics now. We have just seen the technical possibilities, and then we will later in activity 3 see what is the economical feasibility. Finally, we made also one flood protection scenario, because this river has a lot of flooding problems. In 2017 there was a big flood causing damage. Mandal down here and Øyslebø, which is here, are the two biggest municipalities, and they are both prone to flooding. So here we make this pump storage plant, which pump this protected side river. It's not protected when it gets into the main river, so then we can pump it up. That reduces the flood. And then we have down here, we have this, it's basically a flood bypass tunnel, but we include a hydropower plant. And then we can basically bypass, we can reduce a 200-year flood of 1,240 cubics down to a 20-year flood, which is about 800, I think. So the difference in that water we can bypass. And that is, so when it runs as a flood bypass, we disconnect the power plant, because that is a major break, kind of a throttle in the system. So then we just bypass water, but then when there is not flood, but still high enough water discharge, we can run also as a power plant in parts of the year. But still, we need to have enough water here for the salmon. So it's a pretty high minimum environmental flow here. Yes. So that are the 3 scenarios we have developed. Activity 3 has now started. They are making production simulations of the system. We do not have the results yet. So now also some preliminary findings, kind of, I would say, preliminary conclusions, which we are not 100% certain about them yet, but we see some indication. The first one is that all of these 3 scenarios, we think we can say they can be environmentally friendly if we have all these environmental projects. We think that in sum we can argue that they are, at least they don't have a negative impact. So of course this one will have local negative impacts, but then these positive impacts from the other ones will weigh up. Then that was kind of what we knew from before, that this upgrading will not be profitable in the current market. So therefore we will investigate what market conditions are necessary. Yes, and that was very good that we actually found some new interesting power projects, because then we proved that, okay, in existing hydropower systems, there are still projects that can be found. And it's much better to build, for example, a project in an already built system compared to they have discussed opening these protected rivers. And then we should focus and prioritize existing systems instead of trying to open already protected systems. So this one, as I said, Storavatn reservoir. It has a volume of 280 million cubics, which is a lot. And quite big dam, but not unheard of. Here is this flood power plant. And this concept, at least I have been very interested in after this finding, because it's so relevant for many places in Norway. Most of our major cities, they are located at the river exit to the sea. And those cities are the ones with the highest damage potential. And then if you can bypass with the flood bypass and produce power, that should be relevant several places. And especially here for Mandal. They have last year made a flood analysis of the system, and it shows a lot of downtown here will be submerged for a 200-year flood. And if we can build this, it will reduce 200-year flood to 20-year flood, which doesn't have any significant impact. The problem is we calculated the costs and the production from this one if we have a high environmental flow, and then it's not profitable as a hydropower project. But if society say that this flood protection is worth something, which it is, then society should be able to join as a part investor in the project, and then there should be feasibility in such projects. So that is interesting. Yes, Torbjørn already showed this. The intake for flood power plants, pump storage plants, which we see as it's necessary to solve. And we have a similar one for the flood power plant. And from the project, we are making now a list. We have about 20 kind of innovations that we see that we are evaluating in the system. And then we have 22 research project cards that we propose as that they should be studied in the future. The way we have worked in this project, we are now here at the end. Why do everybody like this project? I don't know. Tonje says so. So yes, I trust Tonje. So I think one of the good things is that it has been a very open project. We have got this task. Okay, you are to study extreme upgrading. You have to work multidisciplinary. And then we kind of made way almost as we went. And the way we have worked is that we have had a meeting every second week, and we have discussed the project and, for example, this flood power plant. How can we make it? What are the challenges? And as a researcher, that is the best way to work. You have almost no kind of outside pressure. You don't have any. We have some deliverables, but we are not that forced to kind of. You have to deliver a report tomorrow. We have had freedom, which have been, I think, made some creativity. And for example, one discussion I liked was that we have been discussing, can hydropower tunnels be a potential habitat for fish? Today we are making the trash rack to block fish. They are not allowed to go into the hydropower tunnels. But in Kvina River, in Sira Kvina system, we are building a fish ladder to make 6 kilometers new habitat for fish. And at the same time, in the Sira Kvina system, we have over 100 kilometers of tunnel. If we can use those tunnels as habitats, then we can, it's a really big potential. But yes, that is one of the ideas we have been discussing, and we are not sure yet if it's actually possible. But we hope to have some time to work on it. Yes, so do you have some comments, Torbjørn?
Of course, we are challenging his ideas of having fish in the tunnel, but it's kind of an example of the creativity and the ideas and the discussion we are having in this kind of project. When I started working with environmental effects in regulated rivers 25 years ago, one of my frustrations was that every time a new hydropower station was designed and constructed, it was always done by the engineers, the hydropower engineers, and then they came up with a suggestion, and then afterwards the environmental people like me and others came and said, okay, this will create a big problem. So my thought then 25 years ago was that why can't we work together and come up with much better projects if we actually know and understand each other's challenges? And I think that's why I like this project so much, that we're actually just on paper, just in theory, but we're working together to try to design and complete the construction of a regulatory river system, and considering simultaneously the environmental issues and the hydropower issues. That I think is really, really important. And HydroCen could simply be a hub for different projects, which is to a large extent is, but it can also be a true cross-disciplinary program. And I think that is what this project has shown us, that we can actually learn a lot. Working 25 years with regulated rivers means that I know something about hydropower and hydropower production and tunnels and turbines and everything, but I have learned a lot during this process. And I also hope this kind of meeting we're having today is a way of learning about the different topics. So you hardcore hydropower engineers know something about ecology, and me as an environmental scientist know something about hydropower stations and how they operate. What are the limitations? Because then I can also make suggestions for better environmental solutions that is actually good also for hydropower. So I think this kind of work, cross-disciplinary projects, are really important in HydroCen, and I hope we'll get more of this. And I think this exercise has been very interesting and rewarding for those that have participated, and I hope more people are interested in participating in this kind of cross-disciplinary projects to learn more about each other's scientific background.
I have also one comment that I would like to make on these multidisciplinary projects. I have been the project leader now for a group with many good researchers, and a challenge actually with such very multidisciplinary groups is that if you have a meeting, then you are bound to have a discussion on some issues, and then some of the people joining will not have a clue or will be irrelevant completely for them. And that is a little bit of a challenge. So my experience now from this is that the meeting agenda has to be very flexible. You cannot have a fixed saying, today we discuss this, because also since we were a large group, then who came to each of these every bi-weekly meetings were a variable. So then if we could adapt the meeting and the discussions to actually came, that has been was more fruitful. So that was one, if we're going to work in this multidisciplinary project in the future, then that was a takeaway. Yes, I think that is.
Any good thoughts from the audience?
You're talking about tripling the existing power plant installed capacities. I was just wondering how you came up with that number. Why a factor of 3? Why not 2 or 4?
Very good question. The reason this was more or less a number chosen from something wild, but the idea was that we cannot simply say 50% increase, because then you could do it by simply making some small facelifts of existing power plants. So if you have a triple installed capacity, then you are actually free to completely redesign the entire system. So that was the major idea. Some more questions, comments?
You're talking about fish habitats in tunnels systems. I was just wondering how the fish get out of the tunnel system. And
Do you have the answer, Torbjørn? The main, at least in my head, idea for now is that we put the trash rack, which we today have at intake, we put that where the tunnel ends and where we go into the penstock. Then this tunnel system is more or less a part of the river. Fish can move freely in and out. And then we have some challenges if we dewater the tunnel, for example. Then we have to have some escape routes. But in general, if it can work as a new part of the river, kind of this, what you call blindtarm in Norwegian, it will work as that. Yes, good question.
I had this question once before in one of the meeting also, but I'm also asking here, are fish afraid of dark?
Oh no.
They're not afraid of darkness.
No. But there has to be some production there as well. They have to feed on something. They don't only need a place to be. They need to do something there as well. Have to find food then, and there has to be food there. And so there are a lot of challenges. And in my opinion, we should stick with having fish in rivers and lakes and not in tunnels. But I'm open for discussion.
No, it's a simple question. Like if fish ladder can be covered, let's say a 500 meters length of fish ladder, and it's covered, completely covered.
They can pass in darkness. Yes. They have quite a good vision. They can actually feed in almost complete darkness as well. So it's not a physiological or sensory limitation to that. I can also mention that we had this in connection with the user group meeting. We had this seminar or a separate section on this project, and it is kind of fascinating because I early saw that, for example, this intake to this flooding power plant was a major challenge because we don't want fish to be flushed into the ocean. But it's amazing that if you sit with biologists and engineers together and they come up with an idea, and I think it's doable. We have already been discussing how to solve this large intake. How many cubics are you?
400 cubics.
400 cubics, which is a big intake, and if the 400 cubics disappear into a tunnel, then fish will go there. But it's actually doable. We came up very fast with the solution, combining the knowledge that we have as ecologists and been working with fish migration for many years, and the engineers' way of thinking. So it was possible, and it's kind of a very interesting process. And see what we can find some solution if we work together.
Okay, then.
Just one more question. You said the third part of the project was actually a social science part, looking at recreational use and social aspects around reservoirs and the river stretches. Did you also find good solutions in regard to this third aspect? Are there win-win solutions possible? Or did you encounter there some challenges? I was just interested to hear a little bit about that dimension as well.
I think generally we are looking into adaptation kind of measures. That how can we make measures that actually improves accessibility or the possibility of using areas. But of course, we also, I mean, minimum flow stipulation is important from a logical point of view, but also from a recreational and aesthetics point of view. So, but we are not too good on that. But we have some suggestions that involves adaptations, like building flexible access for boats, for example, to floating systems and stuff like that. And of course, doing stuff that improves the fishing, the fish population is also important for recreational use.
How do you actually plan to use these cards? Do you have like a specific use for them outside the AlternaFuture, or? Sorry.
Yeah, this we call it a Godstock, playing card desk, and we actually want to make a physical playing card deck with this that we give them 2, 3, 4, 5 to king and ace, and then you can play with them physically. But more concrete in HydroCen, these projects will be given to the owner of the system, and we have this innovation cards. They will be also used in HydroCen centrally to have an overview of each innovation and what is the potential for the case study we have seen. And then we have the research projects cards, which we hope we can give to HydroCen, you, the leaders. And then if you have some extra money, then you say, okay, the top one here, because we want to sort them in which one we like the best and worst. And then you can just pick the top one, okay, 4 million kroner, go. And then second one, okay, you go. So that is what we hope can be possible. Yeah, at least the cards are available for you.
And it has been presented internationally as a way of working with this is using these cards, playing cards.
Yeah. Very simple method.
Yeah.
What card do you think will trump them all?
Reality card? Oh, I think we don't have any cards for environmental disaster, but that would be a trump then. Here cancels everything.
I think, of course, economy, profit is a challenge. But I think the work has been done at SINTEF, where we're trying to see what kind of price variation will you depend on to be able to make this profitable. It's very interesting. And of course, that's why we chose to do it like this. We think that in the future there will be more price variation, there will be a higher demand for flexibility. And that's why we made it like this. And let's see, some might not be very profitable, others might be. Some profit in it. So, and also this discussion on flood protection, who pays for it, is a very interesting topic. And obviously, we are currently spending hundreds of millions of kroner on physical measures to protect the infrastructure in several river systems. This is an alternative way of doing it. But who will pay if it's not profitable per se?